A young South Korean woman falls from a hot air balloon into North Korea and is saved by a North Korean man. They begin a thrilling secret love story until the police discover it and everything changes. Ji-woo Park, a renowned South Korean visual artist, known for her paintings that captured the essence of her country's landscapes with a Baroque touch, was looking for an occasion that would give her inspiration for a canvas completely different from anything she had ever done. With an adventurous spirit, she constantly sought new challenges. Her passion for exploring new horizons led her to unusual places, and that's how, one day, she decided to participate in an artistic expedition in a hot air balloon. The idea was to capture unique aerial views of the South Korean landscapes, something that few people had the opportunity to do. She was excited, feeling the wind on her face as the balloon climbed higher and higher. The vastness of the horizon and the beauty of the mountains and valleys were breathtaking. Ji-woo couldn't stop sketching in her notebook, her hands moving almost automatically, guided by the inspiration of the moment. What she didn't expect was that her journey would take a completely unexpected turn. A sudden storm appeared on the horizon, taking her by surprise. The strong winds began to push the balloon in uncontrollable directions. Ji-woo tried to maintain the balloon's course, but the force of the storm was overwhelming. "Oh my! What do I do now? My God!" she screamed, overcome by fear. Chaos took over, and the artist lowered herself and clung to whatever she could, praying that this torment would soon end. After a series of turbulences, the balloon descended abruptly, landing in a dense forest. The force of the impact caused Ji-woo to be thrown out of the basket and faint, the balloon being badly damaged. After what seemed like a few hours, as it was already night, she woke up disoriented, trying to remember what had happened. She looked at the wreckage of the balloon, realized that she must have had an accident, but didn't know who she was, where she came from, or what she should be doing there. She began to walk unsteadily through the trees, making an effort to see a few inches in front of her, since the darkness was total. Her cell phone was broken, and the moon, which should have helped with some lighting, was still covered by stormy clouds, which made the situation very critical. With an excruciating headache and several injuries to her arms and legs, that journey seemed like a torture session. To make matters worse, her clothes were completely soaked, which left her shivering with cold. As despair took hold of her, she made an effort to, despite the pain, scream as loud as she could. "Help! I need help! Is there anyone there? Someone help me, please!" She spent a few more minutes walking and asking for help until she couldn't take it anymore. Crying and without hope of getting out of there alone, she sat on a log and took a deep breath, imagining what would become of her life if she stayed there for a few more hours. Maybe she would die of hypothermia, or from the blow she had taken to the head. What she found saddest was that she would die without even having in her mind a movie of her happy moments with the people she loved, because she couldn't remember absolutely anything. "I never imagined that everything would end like this," she managed to whisper before fainting again. Ji-woo woke up with the movement of being carried and was startled to realize that she was in a man's arms. Unable to think clearly, she looked at his face and asked, "Did I die?" He smiled at those words. "I hope not, miss. Otherwise, it means I'm dead too, ha ha ha," he replied, and continued, "Are you okay? I'll take you to my house and treat those wounds. You were very lucky that I was looking for firewood in a more distant place today, otherwise no one would have heard you in that deserted forest." Ji-woo was so weak that she couldn't speak anymore, but she took a deep breath and leaned against the man's chest, letting herself be carried, extremely relieved to still be alive. Arriving at the house, which was in a clearing in the forest itself, he laid her down on the sofa and took a first aid kit. He began to clean and sterilize the areas of the wounds, focused. She looked around and realized that the house resembled a chalet, simple but cozy and warm. There were some canvases hanging on the walls, and near the fireplace, a piano that seemed to be old, but very beautiful and well-preserved. He suddenly broke the silence. "Sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Minjun Kim. What's your name?" Ji-woo made a great effort to remember her own name, but was unsuccessful. I don't remember my name. Actually, I don't remember anything about myself." She paused, and with a lost look, continued. "The only thing I remember is that I woke up in the forest near the wreckage of a balloon with this terrible headache and all my clothes wet." I started walking and calling for help, but I couldn't continue and I was sure I would die right there. Minjun watched her with an expression of surprise, trying to assimilate what she had told him. She was in a balloon that fell. But where did she come from? What was she doing there, and alone? Could there have been someone else in the balloon and they had died? Realizing that Jiwoo had a different accent, he became even more confused, imagining that she could be from a more distant district of North Korea. Yes, North Korea. The storm had taken Minjun beyond the border, and she was now in North Korean territory. The fact that he had an unknown woman with no past worried Minjun a lot, since if the government found out, he would be in big trouble. He could, at best, be sent to a forced labor camp, or something much worse if that woman was involved in something illegal. However, he couldn't just put her outside. She couldn't take care of herself for the time being, and didn't know anything about herself. He would have to think of some plan that could help her, and at the same time keep him out of trouble. Well, we have to think of a name for you. Otherwise, what am I going to call you? Balloon Girl? Ha 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 ha. He tried to make the atmosphere lighter, and continued. What name do you like? She thought for a moment and replied, I don't have a preference. I hope to recover my memory soon, but you can think of a name if you want. You are welcoming me and treating my wounds. That gives you good credit, haha. She laughed, but immediately grimaced when she realized that it made her whole body hurt. That's true. Let's call you then Yuna, which means beauty and grace. What do you think? He asked, now paying more attention to Jiwoo's face and realizing how delicate and symmetrical it was. The name suited her well, because she was in fact very beautiful and graceful, he thought. For me, it's fine. Thank you, she said, putting the pill and water he had given her in her mouth. That should ease your headache. Anyway, the ideal is to seek medical attention as soon as possible, to make sure you don't have anything too serious. The problem will be how we will do this without causing problems with the government. I'll try to think of something, but now rest. I'll prepare dinner. She had barely finished listening to Minjun's words, and her eyes closed, falling into a deep sleep. When she woke up, she was surprised by a very good smell of food and the sounds of piano. She got up very slowly and saw Minjun playing the instrument, with his eyes closed, completely immersed in the melody. It was a beautiful, emotional, and visceral song that she had never heard before. She watched him carefully until he realized that she had woken up and stopped playing. How are you feeling, Yuna? He asked, approaching the sofa where she was. I think the medicines worked. The pain is much less now, she said, and added, You play the piano very well. What song was that? Ah, it's something of my own. As you know, but you shouldn't remember we can't have access to foreign music, so everything I play is basically my own, or the North Korean composition songs that we play in orchestra performances. Minjun was speaking when he was interrupted by Jiwoo. Oh, an orchestra? So you are a professional musician? That's right, I'm the main pianist of the National Orchestra, he said with an embarrassed smile. That's wonderful, Minjun. I was moved to hear you play. Even without remembering my life, I feel extremely sensitive to art. Maybe it's part of me somehow. She reflected thoughtfully. Soon after, she continued, And besides being a musician, you are also a cook? I smell something divine. Ha 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 ha. As a cook, I'm an excellent musician. But I believe that living here alone for many years has taught me to prepare some decent food. For today, we have rabbit stew. Are you served? He said, smiling, which made her smile too. Without realizing it, they stayed in this scene for a few moments, exchanging glances and smiles. Definitely, I'm starving. Ha ha ha, Jiwoo replied. Minjun brought dinner to her, helping her whenever necessary, and they talked a lot that night. Whenever possible, he asked Jiwoo some questions to confirm if her memory was really completely erased, and she could never answer. He gave his bed to Jiwoo and went to sleep in the living room, getting up sometimes to give her some medicine or water. The next day, despite still having sore limbs and a throbbing head, Jiwoo was feeling much better, being able to get up without help and walk a little around the chalet and its surroundings. Minjun was being an exemplary caregiver and host, preparing more substantial meals so that she could regain her strength and giving her all the support she needed. He searched through his things and found some old clothes that belonged to his mother. He washed them and gave them to Ji-woo, who felt revitalized after a bath and with clean clothes. Over the following days, Ji-woo began to help him with some household chores, as a return for all the care she was receiving from Min-jun. They were getting closer and closer, and the daily contact with his music seemed to unlock some areas of her brain that were linked to her ability to paint. She began to make some beautiful drawings portraying the chalet, the forest, Minju at the piano. He was amazed by her skill, and he got some plants in the forest so that they could extract their dye and she could color. Little by little, beautiful canvases were appearing on the walls of Min-jun's house, signed by Ji-woo, and new songs, with melodies never before imagined by him, were now played daily on the piano, revealing the new emotions that inhabited his heart. He was in love. Waking up to the smell of coffee, looking out the window and seeing Ji-woo walking among the flowers was the most spectacular thing Min-jun could imagine. Until the moment he met her, he had never thought about getting married and having a family. He had been a lone wolf for many years and thought that the company of music was enough. But with her there, everything had changed. He had never met a woman with such a wonderful personality. Every conversation, every look, every movement she made left him completely intoxicated. He wasn't sure if Ji-woo's feelings were reciprocal, but the way she admired him while he played the piano, started conversations whenever she could and made an effort to please him, indicated that she was possibly also attracted to him. But there was only one way to be sure, by declaring himself openly to her. However, he wanted to wait for the right moment to make an unforgettable declaration, worthy of his beloved. Shortly before she died, Min-jun's mother gave him the engagement ring that his father had given her in her youth, and which, despite being simple, was a real jewel and was in impeccable condition. He had always kept the item stored, imagining that he would never use it, but that night he took the ring, polished it, and put it in his pocket, his heart pounding as he imagined it on Ji-woo's finger. The next day, Min-jun woke up a little later and realized that he was alone at home. Ji-woo must have been on her morning walk as usual. She liked to walk in the forest early in the morning, as it helped her to be inspired for her paintings, and sometimes some fragments of her memory came to the surface, but she still didn't remember anything that would help them know who she was. For now, she continued to be Yuna. While Min-jun was having breakfast, the silence was broken by knocks on the door. He found it strange, since Ji-woo knew that she could freely access the house. He got up and went towards the entrance, and when he saw who was knocking, his heart froze. He looked petrified at the two police officers who were in front of him, swallowed hard, and tried to act naturally, asking how he could help them. Without asking permission, the police officers entered the chalet, looked around, and, turning their attention to Min-jun, said, "Good morning, sir. We found a hot air balloon that fell in the forest a few kilometers from here, and some items that show that a person managed to leave the place. Do you have any information about this event?" Min-jun, using all his strength to remain calm, processed that question for a few seconds. He couldn't talk about Ji-woo, as he had no idea what could happen to her if she was found. On the other hand, if he was caught lying, his fate would certainly be tragic. So he tried to sound as convincing as possible. "No, sir. I live isolated here in my chalet, and I only usually go out when I'm called to play in the National Orchestra. I don't know anything about this accident." "You really do look familiar. I've attended some concerts by the National Orchestra. What instrument do you play?" one of the police officers asked, sounding lighter, as if he was happy to be talking to an orchestra star. "I'm Min-jun, the main pianist, sir," he replied, praying that the conversation would end soon. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Min-jun. I ask that you inform the authorities if you see this woman. We found her document near the balloon, and it is urgent that we know where she is," the police officer said, showing Min-jun the document with his beloved's photo. "Her name is Ji-woo, and she's from South Korea?" Min-jun tried to process all that information without showing his shock, but it was really hard to hide. So, Yuna's real name was Ji-woo, and she was South Korean? My God, that was beyond anything he could have imagined. Now he understood why her accent was strange to him, why her personality was so free, different from any North Korean woman he had ever met. She would be happy to know that he had gotten this information about her past. "Yes, sir. If you have any information about this woman's whereabouts, please contact the government. Have a good day." The police officer responded and snapped Min-jun out of his little trance. "Of course, sir. I will let you know. Have a good day." They left the house, and seeing them disappear among the trees, Min-jun took off in the opposite direction, looking all around trying to locate Ji-woo. With every meter he ran, he became more desperate to find her and hide her in his cabin, away from the danger the police represented. If they caught her, my God, what could happen? She knew practically nothing about herself. She wouldn't be able to answer any questions during interrogation. Would they believe that she had amnesia and spare her from torment, or would she be mistreated until she couldn't take it anymore? Every thought like that invaded Min-jun's mind and made him even more distressed in his search for her. After several minutes of running and already exhausted, he heard the sound of a car engine in the distance. He followed through the forest to try to see the vehicle, and to his horror, there was his Yuna, being led by the two police officers into the patrol car. Even from a distance, Min-jun noticed her confused expression, looking around, seemingly searching for him. He stared at that scene in turmoil, tears welling up in his eyes, knowing that he wouldn't be able to arrive in time and intervene in any way, even if it meant his death. He was willing to do that, but the car was already pulling away and taking his Ji-woo away. Returning to his cabin, Min-jun closed the door behind him and collapsed to his knees, letting the tears fall and sobbing uncontrollably. He had lost the love of his life and hadn't even told her how much he loved her. Why hadn't he taken advantage of the moments they had together to confess his feelings? Why hadn't he proposed to Ji-woo when he had so many opportunities? Min-jun was certain that there was no possibility of them meeting again, and he would have to live with the guilt of not having told Ji-woo that she was the most important thing in his life. But what he didn't imagine was that fate was about to change everything. Far away, Ji-woo was taken to a room in a government building in Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. Totally disoriented, she became extremely nervous when they started asking questions about her life, why she had entered North Korea illegally, what day her balloon had fallen, etc. Besides not having this information, she didn't want to say anything about Min-jun, as she was very afraid that the government would punish him for having taken her in. That morning, she had woken up feeling ready to have a decisive conversation with him. It had been some time since she had realized that she had fallen in love, but she was afraid to talk to Min-jun about it and he not feel the same, which would make her presence in his house unsustainable. But she was willing to take that step because if his answer was positive, they could finally live as a couple without wasting any more time. Ironically, after making that decision, she was captured by the police, and now she was there, without any hope of realizing the plans she had when she woke up and, worse, praying to get out of that sudden situation alive. By sheer luck or divine intervention, after a few hours confined in the small room, Ji-woo was informed that she would be immediately taken to the airport to be deported to South Korea. She received her documentation back, and how great was her surprise to learn her real name and that she was South Korean. The South Korean government had been looking for her and in contact with North Korea since the day of her whereabouts, since it had identified her crossing the border from the testimony of other people who were also ballooning at the same event. Ji-woo was a very famous and influential artist, not only in her country, but throughout Asia, and it would be a terrible mistake for the North Korean government to cause any harm to her. In this way, the issue ended up unfolding in the best possible way. Arriving at her house, she was received with great celebration by her family and friends, who had fought so hard with the government to find her again. She immediately started medical follow-up to treat her brain damage, and over the following weeks gradually began to remember her story. Despite the joy of being alive, close to her family and having her memories back, none of that erased the pain and anguish of having lost Min-jun. Every day she woke up and missed walking through the forest, preparing coffee for him, watching him play the piano beautifully, talking for hours by the fireplace. She cried bitterly, imagining what his life would be like now, if he had been caught for hiding her for so long, if he also missed her. All she could do now was pray for him to be well and relive the moments together in her mind. Until, one day, the unthinkable happened. Browsing a social network, Ji-woo saw an advertisement for a big concert that would take place in a hotel in Seoul, South Korea. Reading the details of the announcement, Her heart almost jumped out of her mouth, and her breathing became labored when she saw that name. Minjun, soloist pianist of the National Orchestra of North Korea, would be making a unique and unprecedented performance at the event. Unable to believe her eyes, which by this time were starting to tear up, she jumped out of her chair and, thinking quickly, contacted a great friend who was an ambassador in Italy to ask some questions and ask for help for a plan that she would try to carry out in the next few days. The opportunity to meet Minjun was all Jiwoo could think about all the time, until finally, the long-awaited day of the concert arrived. She already had her ticket purchased and went to Seoul, unable to contain such anxiety. She sat in one of the front rows of the auditorium, and when Minjun was announced, it was as if she were in a dream. Seeing him again, so close, so handsome, playing music so magnificently. She couldn't help but let the tears fall, and she stayed there in a state of contemplation. However, she couldn't lose focus. She was there with a goal, and she would only have one chance to make it work. Thus, when the intermission of the event was announced, Jiwoo hurried to the women's bathroom and changed her clothes, wearing a chambermaid uniform practically identical to that used by the hotel employees. She took a tray, a glass, and a bottle of water, which she had also brought in her large bag, which was discarded along with her old clothes in the bathroom trash. Thus, she went towards the private room where Minjun was, gave a nod to the North Korean guards who were at the door, and perfectly disguised did not raise any suspicion, being able to access the place without problems. Minjun was facing away, looking out the window, seemingly admiring the lights and the life that emanated from Seoul, something he had never seen in his own country. Jiwoo approached him, and with a playful but emotional voice said, "Mr. Minjun, would you like some water?" Upon hearing Jiwoo's voice, he turned around immediately, his eyes conveying all the disbelief he felt at that moment. For a few moments, he just looked at her, attentive to every detail, as if he had in front of him the most precious thing he had ever seen. Jiwoo, and before she could say anything else, he quickly approached and did what he should have done a long time ago. He wrapped her in his arms and kissed her. Jiwoo put her arms around Minjun's neck, returning the kiss with all her heart. After a few seconds, they looked into each other's eyes, and still panting, Jiwoo said, "I have a plan so we can be together, but we need to find a way to escape from here now. Do you agree to come with me?" Without any hesitation, Minjun agreed, and they began looking for a way to leave without being noticed. They had to be quick, as the guards would start to find it strange that Jiwoo was taking so long to leave the room. Minjun then saw a ventilation duct in the bathroom, managed to remove the screen that closed it, and the two entered the passage, hoping to reach some safe place in the hotel. Fortunately, after crawling for several meters inside the structure, they saw an exit that led to the laundry room, and then they managed to leave the building through the back door without raising suspicion. Outside, there was a driver hired by Jiwoo, who was waiting for them to take them to the airport. During the journey, the two, completely overtaken by the adrenaline of the escape and the joy of being together, looked at each other, crying and laughing at the same time, still not believing that all of this was happening. At the airport, they boarded a chartered plane, which took them directly to Italy. There, with the help of her great ambassador friend, Jiwoo managed to obtain citizenship for herself and Minjun, where they could finally live their love story without any risk of repression and arbitrary separation. She continued to work with her art, painting, exhibiting, and selling beautiful canvases, now also becoming very recognized in Europe, and he, due to his long career and musical ability, was hired by the Milan Symphony Orchestra, reaching levels never before imagined in his career. Jiwoo and Minjun were married, had 4 beautiful children, and a few years later, the incredible story of the artist couple was portrayed in books and films, as proof that true love transcends any barrier. If you were moved by the story of Minjun and Jiwoo, then surely this one that is appearing on your screen will surprise you too. I'll see you there.